Why was Jesus warning about the leavening of the Pharisees? That's what we're going to find out today in Luke 22. Oh boy, Luke has 24 chapters. That means we only have 2 more after this one, and then we'll start John. This is hard. I have to say that this is the hardest part about doing something like this, is going through the end of Jesus, and not the end, but the death of Jesus. It's heart-wrenching. And each gospel, you go through it, and it's just rips out everything. You almost feel a little bit like Peter. I wish I could stop this, which obviously we can't. So, but this is very hard. But I'm excited about these gospels, each of them with these different purposes and perspectives. And I just think this is going to be great to get into John, and then eventually the Acts of the Apostles, which was also written by Luke. I think it's going to be interesting. And now there's a plot to kill Jesus. We've known this for a while, that they keep trying to trip him up. They're trying to find a way to get Jesus to be put into trouble with the Roman government so he could be ended. And Jesus makes them look bad by, his simplicity and his wisdom. It's not like a deep, dark trick, He just asks them questions they can't answer or won't answer. Anyway, now this is right at the time of Passover, and Passover is when all sorts of people come to the city. The city probably doubled in size, with people on pilgrimages here to be worshiping at the temple, giving sacrifices at the temple, chock full of people. And some of those people follow Jesus. And so the Pharisees were very worried about upsetting everyone. And I think the Romans, we're going to see that when we get to Pilate, are also worried about this as well. But besides that, this is also a time of Passover, because we're going to hearken back to the time of Moses. Jesus has compared himself a few times to Moses. And even in the Transfiguration, he brings Moses to that mountain. But he talks about how Moses lifted up the snake on the pole to heal the people. It's a image of him being put on a stick, on a pole, and healing the people. He is the ultimate Exodus, the ultimate, I'm going to make you my people. I'm going to lead you out. I am going to lead you out of this life of sin and be that leader. I'm going to fulfill the things that Moses could not fulfill. I'm going to actually do those types of things. The Feast of Passover is also called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The idea is that we had to run from Egypt so fast, we didn't have time to bake bread. We made flatbread and just had to carry it with us. We had to get out of town because the angel of death passed over the children of Israel when they had lamb's blood, an adult male lamb's blood on their door. They were told to do this so that the angel of death would know who were the Israelites and who were the Egyptians. And then the Egyptian firstborn sons were killed. The whole imagery, the whole message of Passover is a message of Jesus. So that's why it's also important that it's at this particular time. It says that Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, and he was one of the 12. He was brought to this so many ways. It's so complicated. I think this is probably the thing I want to find out the most when I get to heaven, is how does this all happen? So Satan entered him, caused him to do this, but we also knew that he was greedy. Satan had been in him for a while. He had lost, his bearing. And like I said, there's all sorts of rumors. Do people think he needed money because he was going to get out of town? Did he want money because he was greedy in the beginning? It kind of hints at that. He wanted the money from that perfume, and he was mad he couldn't have it. Was he mad that Jesus didn't end up being the kind of Messiah he wanted, the kind that were going to kick out these lousy Romans? Now, there's some kind of weird words, and I think we're sort of leaning towards one theory over another. Judas Iscariot, people believe Iscariot means that he was from the town of Cariot. And that's what it hints towards. He was the only apostle that was not from the Galilee area. And so that was that hint to it. Sometimes people said that Iscariot also hinted to the word that meant a knife man. Now, we knew that there was Simon the Zealot, and zealots were, again, people who were going to rebel against the Roman Empire, a real knife man. But was Judas also? Was he looking also for that kind of action? And when he sees Jesus not being that kind of Messiah who's going to kick these Romans out, he gave up hope. Someone even said, I wonder if he was trying to bring a confrontation between Jesus and the Romans. He's like, Jesus is God. I can't hurt him. The Romans can't hurt him. So I'm going to get my money. I'm going to get out of town. Jesus is going to be fine. There's all sorts of reasons and theories we just don't know. But essentially, we do know Satan entered him. He goes and he talks to the chief priests about how he could betray Jesus, and they were happy. They gave him money. Do that. Yeah, do that. And so he looked for an opportunity, it says, to betray him in the absence of a crowd. And because, again, they were afraid of the crowd. And they're looking for a good time, a place, a quiet place where they can take Jesus without having everybody there and causing an uproar. I think the idea, when you think more about it, is that Satan takes those opportunities where we're on the same page as Satan. So it was Judas's doing. He was planning on doing this, and Satan is sitting there thinking, I can help this guy out. And that's where we have to be careful about giving Satan an opportunity to take advantages of those moments. I'm sure Judas had many thoughts, but he leapt on that one and let Judas run with it. So we know from the Gospel of Matthew, he was planning and plotting to kill Jesus. That happened at Caiaphas's house. Caiaphas is going to be the son-in-law of Annas, who was the previous high priest. So you sort of see these plottings going around in their various houses. And he's going to be a big dog in this temple structure for sure. And like I said, Passover, they want to be done with him. And what was interesting is I was reading various commentaries about it, and some people said, oh, this story can't be true because Passover wasn't celebrated like this back then. And of course it was. Of course it was. We have stories of Josephus talking about it. We know that this was celebrated from the time of Exodus every year. It even says it, that they started a celebration on it. So it's kind of a weird thing to say. But this whole Passover is going to parallel everything. And so we're going to see that. And even when I first became a Christian, one of the first things I did is I ran a Seder for my church. And I didn't run it like I was my pastor, but I explained the parallels. It's going to be very interesting, saving the people from sin instead of the Egyptians. And we're going to talk about how this all happens. So Jesus says, go prepare Passover for us. There's going to be a guy carrying a jar of water. And the rumor or the tradition, we don't know, is that was Mark. That it was Mark who was the boy who was carrying water. And the thought was, in tradition, that Mark's family had a home in Galilee and they had a home in Jerusalem. And right now we're in Jerusalem. And he says, follow him to his house and say that my master wants a guest room so that we can have Passover together with my disciples. I saw this, what was called the upper room. You get to tour it if you go to Jerusalem. And so I got to see this upper room. It's big. It seems more like apostle big than disciple big because there was a lot of disciples there. But the idea is that this room was the theory of where it was at. Other people think it was someplace else, that maybe it was outside of Jerusalem. But you get to see where, at least initially, they thought it was. So this boy shows them the upper room. They prepare the Passover meal. And then it says he reclined at the table. And you recline at Passover during the Passover meal because we're free people. The idea is that now we are free from the Egyptians. We can relax at the dinner table. So that was the idea, that they did not sit at dining room stools like we do or table chairs like we do. They reclined at the table. And he says that he wanted to eat this Passover Seder with them before he suffers, before this thing is going to happen. He is teaching his people one last time. And he says, because he won't eat again until the fulfillment of the kingdom of God. He's going to not drink that fourth cup, which is the cup of gratitude. There's separate cups in the Passover Seder, and he's not going to have that fourth one until we're all together in the kingdom of heaven. And that's amazing. So that's when he takes the bread, he prays over it, he divides it among his people. Then he takes the cup of wine and then prays over it and then divides it and lets them drink of the common cup. That is a Passover thing too, is that we eat bread together. We have this meal together. Everything in this meal is symbolic of what's going to happen to Jesus and symbolic of God's saving all of us. This also reminds me of when he went on the mountain and he fed the 5,000 people, right? The first thing he does is he takes the bread that he created, prays over it, divides it among the people, and has it distributed to everyone. We can see all along, this is the imagery that we thought about. I think so amazing when you look at how all of this fits together nicely. There's no way that a person could fit everything in there as nicely as he did. He is basically forecasting how we pray over food, over communion. We do this every time we take communion in this covenant. And so he says that this cup is poured out for you. Poured out usually was a term of suffering. It was a term of sacrifice. And he's saying that it's being poured out for this new covenant. Boy, I'm going to do a podcast sometimes too on the Small Steps with God about all the covenants. But essentially, a covenant is agreement. It's agreement between us and God. And he's saying, I am signing this deal. And there was a covenant with Noah. There was a covenant with Moses. There was a covenant with Abraham. There's a covenant with Jesus. And so that's the idea, is he's signing an agreement. And this is going to be a new covenant with his people, a new plan. He says, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of him. And then he says, this cup is poured out for you. This is the new covenant of his blood. This is where we get into the debate about the body and blood of Jesus at communion. The word is, and so that's why people like in my church think it's the true body and blood of Christ at communion is. This is the body. This is the blood. Is, not like. So anyway, but there's a whole debate about that. Talk to your pastor about that. And then he says, behold, the man who has betrayed me is sitting at this table. And everyone is confused, like, who's going to betray you here, particularly here with just all of us? And this is all happening as predicted for the Son of Man, but woe to that man. It's not just that this was predicted and being carried out, but woe. I wonder, is that the other apostles are like, am I going to accidentally betray you? Is this going to be me? Am I going to lead to your arrest, or am I going to, do something that's going to cause this? And then, but also wondering about anyone else. We trust each of us. We trust each other. How can that be? One of the stupidest debates, I think, in the entire Bible. Like I said, there are times when the apostles are on target. Teach us to pray. Teach us this. They are on target and thinking of kingdom things. And after this all happens, then they're saying, well, which one of us is the greatest? So we've heard, about various people that were part of this conversation, that John and James, Salome's mother, was involved in this, but they were all disputing about who's the greatest. And Jesus is like, this is what Gentiles do, meaning the Romans. They think about kings and then the king's top man and what position you're in, if you're the second best person at the governor's desk or whatever. That's not the kingdom of heaven. That is not the kingdom of heaven. You are trying to think in earthly terms. And instead, if you want to be the greatest, you must become the youngest. You must become the servant. You're going to become the smallest. To be the greatest, you must be the smallest, the best servant. And we've heard that before. It's not the one who leans at the table, the free man, which is the common Passover way. It's the one who serves. And Jesus, is the greatest servant of all. And you should do likewise. If you want to become great, that's how you stay great. And just like the Father assigned me to the kingdom, I'm assigning you. You're going to sit on thrones and judge the 12 tribes. That's what's going to happen. So now we have answers. We know 12 apostles, 12 tribes. I love that whole imagery. And they're going to sit on thrones. Boy, that's amazing. And then Jesus says, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you be sifted like wheat. You're, I think the idea is when you sift like flour, you're separating the bugs from the flour, essentially. You got little sifters, right? You're separating. Satan has demanded that you be sifted like the wheat. You be separated for me. He's taking a stake in you. And I've prayed for you so that you won't fall. But when you turn again, when you come back to me, I have asked for strength so that you can strengthen your brothers. And Peter's like, no way. I am going to go to death with you. I am dying with you. If that's what's going to happen here, I'm going to death with you. And Jesus says that, and this is what's interesting, we switch from Simon to Peter. Remember, rock, stone, right? He says that the rooster will not crow this day until you have denied me 3 times. This is going to be hard to hear. I'm going to betray you 3 times before morning comes. Peter talks a good game. He's a bold guy. He likes to say the thing out of strength. And Jesus is saying it's not going to be there at that moment, that you're going to have a point where you're not going to be able to rely on your own strength, and you're going to have to put your faith in God. You're going to have to rely on God and start thinking of godly things. And then Jesus says something that's interesting. He says that, back when I sent you out 2 by 2, right? Told you not to take a bag, not to take any extra clothes or anything like that, money bag. Did you lack anything? Did you need anything? And they're like, no, we didn't need anything. And then he says, the one who has the money bag, Judas was the money keeper. He was the treasurer of their group. Take it. And the knapsack. And if, let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy a sword. The scripture must be fulfilled in me. And he is numbered with the transgressors, people who sin, right? The people who are plotting against Jesus. That person, he's going to be a betrayer. Because it's all been written. And this is all going to be a fulfillment. And they were, again, perplexed because they don't quite pick up on everything. And they're all like, well, wait a minute. Why do we have to buy a sword? I mean, we have 2 of them. And then Jesus says, it's enough. Be done with this. You don't understand what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's not like, 2 swords are enough. This isn't about swords. This isn't about buying swords. You're not getting any of this. And we're talking about Judas. He got paid to betray Jesus. And now Jesus is going out to pray on the Mount of Olives. Again, people at that time and throughout time think of Mount of Olives as a place of death, even though it's quite lovely. It's across the valley. And it gives you this perfect view into Jerusalem. You get to look upon it. You get to look into it and say, this was supposed to be the place of God. And he asked them to come and pray so that temptation doesn't enter. He's not asking them to pray for him, for his benefit. He wants them to pray for their benefit. So he goes a short distance, a stone's throw away. Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. That's how we should all pray. Your will be done. We pray it all the time in the church. It's a hard thing for us to consider. We want our will to be done. But Jesus is saying, if this can not happen, which it has to happen, then your will be done. Then appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthened him. He is in agony, prayed even more earnestly. And now sweat is coming from him like drops of blood. Someone said that when you have blood coming out of your sweat, that is a physiological stress beyond all others. He's a man, even though he's God. He isn't a physical being, and he is sweating blood. And Luke, as a doctor, would have recognized this as something horrible. And he mentions it. So he rose up, goes back to the disciples who are sleeping. Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray so that you won't enter temptation. We already seen Judas fail, and now he's hoping that they don't fall into temptation too. And so then while he's speaking, a crowd comes up to him. So again, the Mount of Olives is going to be sort of a little forest grove of olive trees, and it would be away a little bit. I forgot how long it took me to get there. 20 minutes, walk across this Kidron Valley because it's kind of steep on the other way up, right? And not many people there, not going to have a crowd there. And instead, Judas has already failed. Judas in the crowd come up to him, and Judas says, the one that I kiss, that's Jesus. He comes up to Jesus and he says, you gonna betray the Son of Man with a kiss? I mean, look how insulting this is. And in the other Gospels, we know that Judas said, Rabbi, and the I at the end means mine, my rabbi, my teacher. It's an endearment term. And so at the end, he is going to say in a term of endearment and kiss his rabbi on the cheek. It's such a betrayal, not even on a corporate level, but on a personal level. And then those that were around him said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? It is not mentioned. It's not mentioned until we get to John. This was Peter. Peter swung the sword. And in this particular case, he swings at one of the men that were out there. This is going to be a servant, and slices off his ear. That's a headshot. When you're swinging a sword at someone's head, you're trying to take them out. And in this particular case, it was not trying to just make someone back up, right? And Jesus says, no more of this. He touches the man, heals him. This was saving two men. It was saving the man whose ear was chopped off, and it was also saving Peter, because if Peter had killed that man, he would be on the run for the rest of his life. Now there's no more crime. So Peter is free from a crime he committed, that he is no longer there. He's saving two men. And so then the chief priests and the officers, elders come out, speak against him. And Jesus says, did you come out with swords and clubs like I was a robber? Do you think I'm some kind of threat to you? Have I ever threatened any of you? Am I a criminal? I was there with you day in and day out at the temple. You didn't do anything. You were scared of the crowds. You came in the middle of the night in the power of darkness. You come here to do this. You're a bunch of cowards because of this. And then they took him, it says, to Caiaphas's house, the chief priest. It starts there. And what starts is a series of fake trials. What's supposed to happen is when you're accused of a crime, you're supposed to get in the Sanhedrin a defense attorney, essentially, someone to help you. There's a prosecutor, there's a defense attorney, there's evidence that's brought, witnesses that are brought. Instead, we're going to bring them to our house, and we're going to have these informal trials that are against Jewish law. They're against Roman law. We're going to try to get a confession out of you before we have a real trial. And now we know that Peter was following at a distance. I wonder if he thought he was going to bust his rabbi out, get him out of this, doing something bold and see if he can save him, some kind of plan or something like that. And he's standing there pretending like he's just sort of warming his hands. There's like little fire things outside this fire in this courthouse of Caiaphas, the house. And a little girl sees him and says, hey, you're one of them, aren't you? And he says, no, woman, I don't know who he is. Someone else saw him and said, you're one of them. And Peter's like, nope, not me. I'm not that guy. And then the very last time, the person says, surely you are one of them. I mean, listen to his accent. He talks just like a Galilean, right? I come from the North Woods and I talk like a Youper. And so if you heard my accent, you'd say, oh, she's from the North Woods, eh? Same thing. We know you're with them. You have the accent. And we heard more about this in other Gospels. Pretty young girl. And Peter's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Then the rooster crows. Morning's here. And Peter realizes the very thing that Jesus said he would do, that he insisted he would not do, he did. And it even says that Jesus turned towards Peter and looked at him. He looked at him. He saw what Peter did. Peter knows what he did, that he denied him. And Jesus knows that exact moment. Boy, it's heart-wrenching. It is heart-wrenching. And then it says Peter went and wept bitterly. And so now Jesus goes before the council. This is going to be the Sanhedrin. They're like, if you're the Christ, just tell us. Say it. Let us all know. They're trying to get more details from him. And we get more from this story than any of the other Gospels. And Jesus says to him, if I tell you this, you're not going to believe it. You won't believe anything I say. If I ask you, you're not going to answer anything I ask. Because every time they won't answer. And you don't say anything. So from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of power of God. And so then they're saying, are you saying that you're God? And then Jesus just responds, you say that I am. So again, the I am word is going to be an indication of Yahweh. And there is the very first I am. And then they're like, we've heard it. He's blaspheming. There's wanted posters in ancient Jewish text of Jesus on a wanted power for blasphemy. That's exactly what they're saying. We don't even have to ask him questions anymore. He just admitted it. And so now they're ready. They're done. It's interesting because the Bible talks about how many times Jesus says, I am. I am the light of the earth. I am this or I am that. We hear it all the time when Jesus says it. And now he's saying it again. You say that I am. It parallels Mark 14, 61 through 62. Boy, what I'm going to meditate about is how Peter insisted he wasn't going to deny Jesus, and yet he did. How many times do we rely on our own power? We think about the things that we need to take care of. And when it comes down to the bottom line, we say, we're never going to deny Jesus. We're never going to count on ourselves. We're going to count on Jesus. And then bit by bit, it gets easier for us to do it. And I'm going to think a lot about that. And what I'm going to pray about is that Jesus asks us to pray so that temptation doesn't enter us. And so I'm going to pray that temptation doesn't enter me. And we don't want temptation to enter us. Jesus can handle temptation and we can't. And so I'm going to pray to be strong against temptation. And what I'm going to share with others is the idea that this all has to happen. Everything of it had to happen to fulfill the kingdom of heaven. Everything is going on that schedule. He knows what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. That doesn't mean we don't have free will. Judas has free will. But Jesus knew at the beginning of time that Judas was going to do it. It's not his permission. It's not his doing. He knew Peter was going to deny him. He was not allowing it to happen to cause them to sin, to force them to sin, to force them to not be saved, or whatever becomes of Judas in this case. We have free will, and just because he knows it's going to happen, he allows it to happen. He allows these things to happen, even though he knows ahead of time it is going to happen. And all of it so that we can have the kingdom of heaven, so that we can have everlasting life, so that we never die again, that we get all of that, and we get to drink and eat and feast with Jesus on that last meal in heaven with the cup of gratitude. All of this has to happen. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you listening and watching the YouTube channel. I would appreciate it if you prayed for me. This is hard stuff. I want to get it right. I'm hoping that we're all learning something. I know that at times I might not get something right. I try very hard to do research. And even if we do research and we get the best opinions of mankind on some of these chapters, it doesn't necessarily mean they got it right either. So we're all getting through this step by step, small steps, so we can understand God's word a little bit more. So please pray for me. I would appreciate it. Thanks so much.